Rain hit the emergency department windows in steady sheets, turning the streetlights outside Alder Bay Regional into smeared gold. The parking lot looked like it had been rubbed with oil. Every headlight was a soft flare. Inside, the air was bright and scrubbed sharp with antiseptic and the warm plastic smell that rose off tubing and monitor casings. The night shift moved in a thin hush that never lasted long. A cardiac monitor at triage kept a slow, faithful beep. The vending machine in the corner hummed like it was trying to stay awake. Somewhere down the hall, a gurney wheel squeaked, then stopped. Mara Hayes stood at the nurse's station with a paper cup of coffee she had not tasted. The cup had gone soft at the rim. She held it anyway. Her other hand worked the tracking board, tapping room numbers and times, sliding names into place, with the calm precision of someone setting tools in a drawer. A fresh roll of tape sat aligned with the edge of the counter. Her pen rested parallel to it. Renee Alvarez leaned on the opposite side of the station's shoulders, squared hair twisted up tight. Damp curls had escaped around her ears from the humidity drifting in each time the doors opened. She watched the board for a second, then watched Mara's hands. "You eat yet?" Renee asked. Mara's eyes stayed on the screen. "Not hungry." Renee made a small sound that could have been a laugh. "Nobody's hungry at 1 a.m. That's not the point." Mara clicked a box and entered a time. "I'm fine." Renee accepted the sentence the way she accepted lab results, noted, not trusted. She shifted her weight and looked down the hall toward the trauma bays. The curtains were mostly closed. The floor shone under fluorescent lights that never warmed. Lila Morgan stood a few feet away with a stack of printed labels that had curled at the edges. Her fingers were sticky from sanitizer. She kept smoothing the paper as if she could iron her nerves flat. Mara reached across without looking, pinched the stack, separated them cleanly, and placed them back in order. "Keep them dry," she said. Lila blinked. "I was trying." "They curl when they're wet," Mara replied. "No judgment, just fact." Lila's shoulders dropped a fraction. "How do you stay so calm?" Mara picked up a fresh pair of gloves, checked the size by feel, and set them down again. "Practice." The ceiling camera above the entrance blinked a small red dot patient as an insect. Mara glanced at it, the way other people checked mirrors, quick, automatic, and already moving on. A second later, she was watching the triage monitor again, listening for the beep to change its song. At the sink by triage, she washed her hands until the water ran hot. Soap and iodine clung under her nails. Her sleeve rode up, bearing a thin pale scar on the inside of her left wrist. She tugged the cuff down without looking, then turned her wrist inward as she dried, hiding the line from the room as if it never existed. Dr. Evan Cross swept past the station with his badge swinging and his hair too neat for a night in emergency medicine. He looked at the board, then at Mara, as if the board had pointed him toward her. "Busy?" he asked, casual, like he was commenting on the weather. "Normal," Renee said before Mara could answer. Cross's mouth twitched. "Storms making people brave. Or stupid." Renee didn't smile. "Storm makes people cold. They come in because they're cold." Cross lingered long enough to be noticed. His gaze flicked to Mara's coffee cup. "You ever think about day shift, better hours?" Mara didn't look up. "I like nights." He shrugged, already drifting. "Suit yourself." When he moved away, Lila exhaled as if she had been holding her breath for him. Renee watched Cross's back disappear behind a curtain, then turned her eyes back to Mara. "You sure?" Renee asked again, softer this time. Mara's fingers paused on the keyboard. Not long enough to call attention to it, just long enough to feel the pause in her own bones. She kept her voice even. "Yes." Mara walked down the hall to Bay 4, where a low battery alert chimed on a monitor. The sound wasn't urgent, but it would become urgent if ignored. She popped the casing open, swapped the battery, and listened until the steady beep returned. On her way back, she passed the blanket warmer. Heat rolled out when she opened it, dry and clean. She pulled 2 blankets and folded them tight, edges aligned, corners squared. The gesture was quick, practiced. Not fussy, intentional. A paramedic at the ambulance entrance shook rain off his jacket and called toward the station. "You got any warm ones left?" Mara handed him the blankets and said, "Keep the foil under them if you can. Floor steals heat." He studied the folds. "You always do it like that." Mara closed the warmer door until it latched with a soft click. Hospital habit. The doors at the front slid open and shut as people moved in and out with wet shoes. Water dotted the tile. Someone mopped it, then it returned. The storm kept working on the building, trying every seam. Mara returned to the station and charted with small, steady taps, documenting vitals, complaints, times. She left no empty spaces. The coffee in her cup had cooled into bitterness. She took a sip anyway. It sat heavy in her stomach, more habit than comfort. She set the cup beside the triage clipboard, aligned it with the edge, and looked down the hall again. A call light blinked in Bay 6. A child coughed into a paper mask in the waiting room. Somewhere a phone rang and was answered quickly. The emergency department held its rhythm. Outside rain kept writing on the windows in clear patient lines. Outside rain kept writing on the windows in clear, patient lines. The front doors slid open, and a gust of wet air rolled into the waiting area. It carried the smell of asphalt and cold metal. A man stumbled through the doorway like the motion had thrown him forward. His jacket was too thin for the weather. His hair lay flat against his scalp, water dripping from his chin in heavy drops that splattered on the tile. He tried to speak, or maybe he tried to inhale. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. His knees buckled. He hit the floor with a hard, blunt sound that snapped the whole department awake. Down at the front, someone called. Renee was already moving. Lila froze for half a beat, eyes wide, then stepped back, as if giving space could fix the problem. Mara's coffee cup stayed on the counter. She was across the station before it finished settling. The man's eyes were open, staring past the ceiling lights as if they were too bright to belong to him. His chest did not rise. His lips had a faint gray cast that did not match the flushed red of his wet cheeks. Mara dropped to her knees on the cold tile and lifted his chin fingers firm under the jaw. She watched for any movement at the throat. Nothing. She slid 2 fingers to the side of his neck and held still long enough to be sure. No pulse, she said. Renee came in over her shoulder. Get the monitor. A tech hurried with the portable unit wheels rattling over a seam in the floor. The screen lit with a flat line that felt like a door closing. Mara's voice did not rise. It landed like a weight. Start compressions. Lila stepped in on instinct, then hesitated. Her hands hovered in the air, unsure where to go. Mara set the heel of her palm on the center of the man's chest. She stacked her other hand on top, locked her elbows, and began. Down, up, down, up. The movement was clean, a steady cadence that made the room narrow into purpose. The man's ribs complained under the pressure. A small crack, not dramatic, just real. Mara did not change pace. Bag, she said. A respiratory therapist slid a mask over the man's face and sealed it with both hands. Oxygen hissed. The bag filled and emptied. The chest rose, then fell, pulled by someone else's effort. Renee glanced at her watch. Time of collapse. Just hit the floor, the tech said. Mara counted under her breath, not loud enough for performance, loud enough for timing. She did not look away from her hands. Lila crouched near the crash cart that had been dragged into place. Her fingers fumbled for gloves. She tore the package too wide, and the glove slid out like it wanted to escape. Renee's tone stayed level. Lila breathed. Put your hands where you can help. Mara kept compressions going. You can do IV supplies? Set up open handoff? Lila swallowed and nodded, grateful for a task with edges. Dr. Evan Cross appeared at the circle, pushing through with the brisk walk he used when someone might be watching. His eyes flicked to the monitor, then to Mara's hands, then to the man's face. Assistol, the tech said. Cross nodded once. No shock. Continue compressions. Get access. Mara did not look up. 2 minutes. Switch on my count. Renee positioned herself at Mara's side. Her posture was calm but ready, like a door held open against a storm. The crash cart drawers clacked as Lila pulled them out. Alcohol swabs, tourniquet, catheter kit. Her hands moved fast and shaky. Mara saw the tremor without turning her head. Slow is smooth, Mara said, still pressing. Smooth is fast. Lila's breath steadied. She tore open a swab with care this time. She opened a catheter pack and laid it out in the order she had been taught. Her eyes kept flicking to Mara's hands, anchoring on the rhythm. Renee found a vein at the crook of the man's arm and slid in the catheter. Dark blood flashed in the chamber. Tape went down flat. The IV line connected with a soft click. Mara finished a set of compressions and spoke without drama. Epinephrine, 1 milligram IV. Cross nodded. Give it. Renee pushed the medication. The syringe emptied. The flush followed. On the monitor, the line stayed stubbornly flat. Mara's shoulders stayed stacked over her hands. Down, up, down, up. Her breathing stayed even controlled. Lila stood at the man's feet and held an airway tray open. She offered equipment with both hands, careful not to drop anything. Her eyes were fixed on the mask seal and the rise of the chest. She looked like someone trying to be brave on purpose. Renee called out time. Another minute. Cross watched the strip face tight in concentration. Keep going. The waiting room had gone quiet. Even the television sound seemed to shrink. A woman with a cast on her wrist stared toward the commotion with her mouth slightly open as if she had forgotten to breathe. The ceiling camera near the entrance blinked its red dot. It kept blinking. It did not care. Mara's hands kept their pace. Switch, she said on a count. Renee slid into position and took over compressions with the same controlled force. Mara moved to the side, not stepping away, just changing angles. She checked the mask seal and watched the chest rise with each squeeze. She listened to the wet sound in the man's breathing and adjusted the head position until it cleared. Pulse check, Cross said. Mara reached for the man's neck again. Nothing. Her fingers felt only her own steady pressure against warm skin. Resume, she said. Renee's compressions started again immediately. A tech rummaged through the man's pockets, careful, practical. A wallet came out soaked so thoroughly the paper inside stuck together. Name, the tech said, reading off the plastic ID after wiping it on a sleeve. Walt Briggs, 58. A bus pass folded soft, a receipt for soup, and a slip of paper with a number that had bled in the rain. Renee did not look at the items. Her hands kept pressing. Cross asked, any history? No info, the tech said. Mara moved to the IV and checked flow. She hung a bag of saline and opened it. The drip chamber filled. She watched the line for air. None. She secured the tubing. Tape pressed down smooth, no wrinkles. Next epi due, Renee said through her breath. On it, Mara replied. 2 minutes later, she pushed the next dose. Her hands were steady. Her face was neutral. Her eyes were bright with focus. The monitor flickered once. A weak complex stuttered into view, then slid away again. It returned thicker, slower, as if something inside Walt had decided to try. Mara leaned closer, eyes narrowing. She did not touch the screen. She did not need to. Cross saw it too. Hold compressions. Pulse check. Renee stopped. The room held its breath. Mara's fingers found Walt's carotid. For a moment there was nothing, and then something pressed back, tired and reluctant, like a wave that did not want to break, but did anyway. I have it, Mara said. Pulse is back. The shift in the room was immediate. Shoulders dropped. Someone exhaled hard. Lila made a small sound that was half relief, half disbelief. The respiratory therapist kept the bag moving. He's trying, she said. Walt's chest gave a small, uneven effort under the mask. A breath that belonged to him, not to a squeeze. Renee looked at Mara. Bay 3. Mara nodded and leaned close to Walt, voice low enough that it felt private even in the chaos. Stay with us, she said. Do not let go now. A stretcher rolled in. Sheets snapped tight. The wheels hummed over seams in the floor as they transferred Walt onto it with practiced coordination. Mara supported his head and neck while the therapist managed the mask. The tech guided lines and tubing so nothing snagged. Mara reached into the blanket warmer as they passed. Heat rolled over her hands. She pulled out a thick blanket and folded it once, then again edges aligned. She spread it over Walt's shoulders, tucking the corners like she was making a bed. The fabric steamed faintly in the cool air near the entrance. Walt's eyelids fluttered. His mouth moved as if searching for a word that would not form. You are here, Mara said. That is enough. They moved him down the hall. The department sound returned in layers as the immediate crisis released its grip. Phones rang. A monitor chimed in another room. Water dripped off boots near the doors. When the curtain in Bay 3 closed, it was like a boundary drawn with cloth. Walt lay under the warm blanket, breathing uneven but present color, slowly returning to his cheeks. The monitor above him beeped a steadier rhythm, not confident, but alive. Mara stepped back into the hall and pulled off her gloves. Her hands smelled like latex and iodine. She went to the sink and washed again, longer than necessary fingers, scrubbing in the grooves of habit. The water ran hot. Steam rose and blurred the stainless steel reflection of her face into pieces. Renee appeared beside her, drying her hands on a paper towel folded neat. Nice work, she said, quiet. Mara shut off the tap with her wrist and reached for her own towel. Her sleeve rode up. The pale line on her wrist flashed under the light. She tugged her cuff down as if the fabric had shifted on its own. He did the work, she replied. Renee's eyes stayed on Mara for a beat. Not prying, just taking her measure. You did not let the room get loud, she said. Mara folded the towel once and set it down aligned with the counter edge. Loud does not help. Behind them, Lila stood near the station with her hands clasped, still flushed from adrenaline. She stared down the hall toward Bay 3 like she expected the curtain to open and prove it had all been a mistake. Mara looked at her and spoke without softness, without sharpness. Go chart the times you heard, she said. Be exact. Lila nodded quickly, grateful to be useful again. Mara turned back toward the tracking board. The coffee cup sat where she had left it, bitter and cold. She did not pick it up. Her eyes moved over room numbers and names over the glow of the unit that filled and emptied all night like lungs. Bay 3 now carried Walt Briggs, warmed and monitored breathing on his own. The rain kept hitting the glass steady and indifferent. Inside the rhythm continued. The rain kept hitting the glass steady and indifferent. Inside the rhythm continued. Mara returned to the nurse's station and pulled up Walt Briggs's chart. Her fingers moved with quiet certainty, tapping out times and doses in a clean line of facts. The screen light painted her face a pale blue. Across the counter, Lila stood close enough to watch, but not close enough to crowd her shoulders, still high from adrenaline. Write what you saw, Mara said. Not what you think you saw. Lila swallowed. Okay. Renee leaned over and checked the entry, once eyes scanning for gaps the way she scanned a hallway for hazards. Good, she said, then slid the triage clipboard back into place. She set it down square with the counter edge without realizing she had done it. Mara noticed anyway. She always noticed. Dr. Evan Cross came back through the station with a chart in his hand. His pace had slowed now that the room was not a tight circle around a dying man. He glanced toward Bay 3 as if the curtain might give him a better story than the one he already had. Did we get any history, he asked. Wet wallet, Renee said. Bus pass. No meds list. No address. Cross made a thoughtful sound that landed halfway between sympathy and impatience. All right. We will keep him on monitors and see where he lands. Mara did not look up. He landed here. That counts. Cross's eyes flicked to her a quick check, then away. You talk like you have done this a lot. Mara finished her sentence in the chart, then clicked save. We all have. Renee watched Cross the way a doorframe watches a shoulder pass too close. She kept her voice calm. Doctor, if you want coffee, it is burned. If you want quiet, it is temporary. Cross smiled like he wanted to be liked. I will take temporary. He drifted off toward the chart rack again, leaving a faint cologne note that did not belong in the emergency department. Lila followed him with her eyes until he disappeared, then looked back to Mara. I thought he was gone, Lila said barely above a whisper. Mara's gaze stayed on the board. He was. The words were flat, not dramatic, but Lila flinched anyway. Mara softened her tone by a small degree, not enough to turn it into comfort. Then he was not. Lila nodded, breathing through it. How do you not shake? Mara reached for a roll of tape, checked the edge for tears, and set it down again. I do shake, she said. Just later. Renee's eyes moved to Mara's hands. Mara's hands were steady. If there was any tremor, it lived somewhere deeper behind the ribs. A call bell rang from Bay 5. The sound cut clean through the station noise and then repeated impatient. Renee turned her head. That is the intoxication room. I will go, Mara said. She walked down the hall with her shoulders angled, slipping between a supply cart and a family member without touching either. She moved like she knew where every corner stole space, where every doorway snagged a stretcher. At the bay door, she paused. Not hesitant, just checking the room the way she checked a monitor. A man perched on the edge of the mattress, with his arms crossed, tight, and his jaw locked. His eyes tracked Mara's hands before they tracked her face. You are going to stick me, he said. Mara set a cup of water on the tray table and did not react to the accusation. The cup made a soft plastic sound against metal. Not if you do not need it, she replied. He laughed once, sharp and hollow. That is what you all say. Mara kept her hands visible and slow. She pulled a pulse sensor from her pocket and held it up between two fingers. This is a clip, she said. It does not break skin. His eyes narrowed. He watched her like he expected a trick. Mara placed the clip on his finger. He flinched anyway, then looked down, surprised that nothing hurt. The monitor on the wall took a moment, then gave a steady tone. Drink some water, Mara said. We can talk after your heart stops trying to sprint. The man stared at her. His anger shifted, thinning into confusion. Why are you being nice? Mara's answer was simple. Because you are here. He looked away, embarrassed by his own question. He picked up the cup and drank. The sound of swallowing filled the room in the space where shouting could have lived. Mara took his blood pressure with a cuff that squeezed his arm until his fingers flexed. She watched his face, the set of his jaw, the small tremor at the corner of his mouth. When the cuff released, he exhaled and rubbed his forearm like it had insulted him. Any chest pain, she asked. No, he muttered. Just tired. Then sit back, Mara said. Feet on the floor. Breathe slow. He did not thank her. He did not need to. He leaned back anyway. At the door, Mara paused again. Her eyes swept the hallway corners, exits, then the ceiling camera near the junction. The red dot blinked. She looked away before anyone could think she had looked at all. Back at the station, Renee was checking the crash cart seal. She ran her finger along the plastic tag, then snapped the drawer shut with a clean click. Lila stood beside her hands full of paperwork. How is he? Renee asked. Not a problem if we do not turn him into one, Mara replied. Renee nodded as if that matched her own math. Good. Mara logged the Bay 5 assessment, then moved to Bay 3. She slipped it through the curtain and let it fall behind her. Walt lay under the warm blanket, the fabric rising and falling with uneven breaths. His skin had a little color now, a thin return to cheeks that had been gray. A nasal cannula rested beneath his nose. His eyes were half open, unfocused at first. Mara adjusted the tubing and watched his chest for effort. The monitor beeped steady, not slow, not fast, present. Walt's gaze sharpened on her badge. His lips moved dry. You still here? He rasped. Mara leaned in, so he did not have to spend breath on volume. Yes. His eyelids fluttered. Thought I was outside. You were, Mara said. His brow creased, trying to make sense of that. He swallowed, throat working. Cold, he managed. Mara tucked the blanket tighter around his shoulders, smoothing it once then once more until it lay still. Not now, she replied. His eyes closed for a moment, then opened again. "Thank you," he said, slow like the words were heavy. Mara did not change her expression. She did not turn the moment into anything bigger than it was. "Rest," she said. "If you feel the room spin, press the button." His fingers twitched toward the call light, then stopped. He let the blanket warmth do the work. Mara stepped out and pulled the curtain closed. The hallway smelled like wet coats and alcohol swabs. A phone rang at the front desk. Someone laughed near triage, then cut it short when a monitor chimed in basics. Mara returned to the board and scanned it, eyes moving between room numbers and times. She listened for the change in beeps that meant a new problem was forming. The coffee sat where she left it untouched now, and she did not reach for it. Renee came up beside her again, voice low. "You sure you are fine?" Mara kept her eyes on the board. "I am working." Renee accepted that too. It was not an answer, but it was the truth. She rested her clipboard against her ribs and watched Mara for another beat, not with suspicion, with attention. Mara lifted her hands to the keyboard, fingers steady, and continued to chart as the rain kept tapping the windows, patient and unbroken. Mara lifted her hands to the keyboard, fingers steady, and continued to chart as the rain kept tapping the windows, patient and unbroken. The ambulance radio cracked, then cleared. The dispatcher's voice carried strain under the static. "Alder Bay inbound with a female 51. Severe abdominal pain, pale diaphoretic, heart rate 140, pressure soft and dropping, rigid abdomen, 4 minutes." Renee's head came up. Lila's eyes widened. Dr. Cross turned from the chart rack, focus snapping into place. "Bay 1, Renee said. Mara set her hands on the counter for one beat, feeling the cool laminate. Then she moved. Gloves, sync, gloves again. The vinyl snapped at her wrists. She checked suction oxygen and the airway cart latches with quick touches. The room smelled like bleach and warmed plastic. Lila pulled open a trauma drawer. "What do you need first?" "Lines and labs," Mara replied. "And heat." Renee pointed down the hall. "Clear the bay." The ambulance doors swung inward and rain came with them. 2 paramedics pushed a stretcher, fast, wet prints stamping the floor. The woman on the stretcher was small hair stuck to her temples, skin the color of damp paper. She pressed both hands to her belly as if she could keep something from shifting. "Name is Nina Vega," a paramedic said. 51. Sudden onset pain at home. Went pale, started sweating, heart rate in the 140s, pressure dropping. Fluids minimal response. Nina's eyes were open but unfocused. The lights above her looked too bright. Her lips parted and a thin breath came out. Mara stepped in at her side and found the pulse at Nina's wrist. It hit hard and quick, then slipped for a beat. "Nina," Mara said close to her ear. "Look at me." Nina's eyes found her for half a second. Fear lived there, clean and sharp. "It hurts," Nina whispered. "I know," Mara replied. "You are not alone." Cross moved to the head of the bed. "We are going to take care of you. Any medical history, blood thinners, surgery." Nina tried to shake her head. It barely moved. Mara lifted the sheet enough to see the abdomen. The belly was rigid, not just tender. Skin stretched, glossy under the lights. When Mara pressed lightly with 2 fingers, Nina flinched, and her torso locked in a guarding. That was not choice. "Vitals," Renee called. "Heart rate 142, pressure 82/40, sat 94, she is cold." 2 large bore lines, Cross said. "Type and screen, lactate, CBC, CMP, 1 liter wide open." Lila stepped in with an IV kit and an uncertain breath. Mara touched her forearm, light pressure. "Feel for the bounce," Mara said. "Do not chase it." Lila nodded, swallowed, and found a vein. "Flash," she taped it down. Mara started the second line on the other arm. 1 smooth motion. Flash. Tape pressed flat. A bag of warm fluids went up. Mara opened the clamp until the drops became a fast stream. Nina's skin stayed cold. Sweat beaded on her forehead, wrong against the chill. "We need warming," Mara said. A forced air warmer arrived, hose snaking across the floor. The plastic crinkled as Mara tucked it around Nina's legs. The air it blew smelled faintly like dust in a heater. Cross leaned over the monitor. "Could be sepsis, could be a ruptured ulcer, could be an aneurysm. Get ultrasound." A resident rolled the machine closer. The gel bottle was cold. Mara warmed it between her palms for a moment, then handed it over. Nina moaned when the probe touched her abdomen. Mara stayed near her, shoulder voice low. "Short breath," she said. "In through your nose, out slow." Nina tried. The breath hitched, then found a smaller pattern. Labs populated on the screen. Lila brought the printout, eyes moving fast. "Lactate is high," she said. "Hemoglobin is dropping. White count normal." Cross frowned. "Fluids." They ran in fast, but the blood pressure did not climb. It flickered up for a moment, then sagged again, like a hand losing grip. Mara watched the waveform, the narrow pulse pressure squeezed tight, the heart raced, but it was not winning. Mara looked back at Nina's abdomen, at the way it sat high and hard. "This is not simple volume," Mara said. Cross glanced at her. "What are you thinking?" "Pressure," Mara said. "Something inside is choking flow. Bleed expanding mass compartment effect. She does not respond like infection." The resident paused with the probe eyes flicking to the screen. The image shimmered, then settled. A dark stripe collected where it should not. "Free fluid," the resident said. The room tightened. Cross straightened. "Call surgery." "Trauma," Mara corrected. Renee was already on the phone. "Trauma to Bay 1, possible intra-abdominal bleed, fast, positive, hypotensive." Nina's eyes rolled toward Mara again. Her lips trembled. "Am I dying?" Mara leaned closer. She did not promise. She did not lie. "You are not doing this alone," she said. "Stay with me." The trauma surgeon arrived with rain still on her coat. Dr. Sloan Hart, hair tucked under a cap, eyes that read the room in a sweep. She looked at the monitor, the belly, the ultrasound. "Show me," Hart said. The resident held the probe steady. Hart watched for 2 seconds, then placed her hand on Nina's abdomen, firm but controlled. Nina cried out and shook. "Peritoneal signs," Hart said. "This is blood until proven otherwise. Operating room." Cross started to speak. Hart cut him off with a look that ended the sentence before it began. "Call it." Doors opened. The corridor looked suddenly too long. Mara walked with the stretcher, one hand on the rail, to keep Nina steady over the seams. Nina's fingers caught Mara's sleeve. Weak, desperate. "Please," Nina whispered. Mara covered Nina's hand with her gloved one. "I am here," she said. "Keep your eyes on me." At the operating room doors, the air turned cooler and louder with filtered vents. A team waited. Commands landed in short steps. Mara gave the handoff in plain language. Vitals. Response to fluids. Fast positive. Timing. Facts. Hart nodded once. "Nothing." "Good catch." Mara stepped back as the door swung closed and bright light swallowed Nina. Renee stayed beside Mara in the hall for a moment, both of them listening to the muffled rush behind the operating room door. Cross lingered too, hands on his hips, eyes on the red indicator light above the frame, as if staring could make it turn green. "She came in bad," he said. Renee's voice stayed flat. "She came in dying." Cross's jaw tightened. "We moved fast." Mara watched the closed door. "Fast is only useful when it is clean," she said. Cross looked at her, then away as if the sentence had taken something from him. "You pushed trauma instead of surgery," he said. "Good call." "It was the right call," Mara replied, no smile, no apology. A nurse from the operating side opened the door crack and took the paperwork with gloved hands. The gap released a brief breath of colder air and the metallic tang of cautery. Then the door shut again. Back in Bay 1, the forced air blanket still ran on the empty bed, puffing warm air into nothing. Mara shut it off and rolled the hose tight. She wiped gel from the ultrasound probe with a slow, thorough motion until the plastic shone. Lila hovered near the counter, still keyed up, eyes bright. "I thought you were going to argue with him," Lila said. Meaning Cross, meaning everything. Mara kept her eyes on the probe. "There is no time to win a conversation," she replied. "There is time to win blood pressure." Lila nodded, like she stored the line somewhere deep. The emergency department noise met Mara again when she turned around. A child cried down the hall. Someone argued at the desk about medication. The smell of wet coats mixed with alcohol swabs and food gone cold. Mara went to the supply closet and restocked gel packets, gauze tape. Her hands moved on their own while her mind replayed Nina's eyes and the weight of that question. Lila appeared in the doorway, cheeks flushed. "Do you think she makes it?" Mara slid a drawer shut until the latch clicked. "They got her to the right place," she said. Lila stared at her. "That was you?" Mara set a pack of gauze in the bin. "That was the team," she replied. "That was the team." Mara set the pack of gauze into the bin and pressed it down so it sat flush. Lila stayed in the doorway a second longer, as if she wanted to argue with the modesty, then thought better of it. Her shoulders lowered by a fraction. "Okay," she said. Mara did not turn it into a lesson. She closed the drawer until the latch clicked and moved on to the next shelf. Gel packets, airway swabs, a new roll of tape. She lined the tape with the edge of the plastic divider the same way she lined everything else, not because it was pretty, because it kept her brain from wasting a second when seconds cost blood. Behind her, the emergency department returned to its layered noise. A phone rang near triage and was answered fast. A call light blinked in Bay 6. Someone in the waiting room coughed wet into a paper mask. The smell of rain on coats mixed with alcohol wipes and a faint trace of cafeteria fries that had gone cold hours ago. Renee walked into the supply room without knocking. She did not need to. Her presence filled the narrow doorway the way a closed door filled a frame. You good? She asked. Mara kept her hands moving. Bay 1 is turned over. Renee's eyes flicked over the bins, the restock, the order. I asked if you are good. Mara slid a box of gloves into place and pressed it back until it stopped. I am working. Renee watched her for a beat. Not suspicion, attention. Then she nodded once. Trauma is still in the room, no update yet. Mara's jaw tightened a hair, then released. Tell me when you hear. Renee left footsteps quiet on the polished floor. Mara stepped back out into the corridor and moved toward the nurse's station. Lila had returned to the computer typing with care, her face serious, cheeks still a little pink from the rush. Dr. Cross stood at the chart rack, talking to a resonant voice, confident hands moving as if he could shape the air into agreement. Mara passed them without slowing. The board glowed with names and room numbers. Bay 3 still held Walt Briggs under a warm blanket, monitored and breathing. Bay 5's call light blinked once, then stopped. Someone had gotten there. Cal Stroud stood near the entrance, half in shadow, shoulders squared. He held a phone low in one hand and a ring of keys in the other. Rainwater shone on the fabric at his shoulders like a thin glaze. He did not look rushed. He looked awake. Mara's eyes tracked him the way they tracked every hazard in the department, not because she wanted a story, because it was her job to keep the room from surprising her. Cal noticed. He gave a small nod, a quiet acknowledgement that he saw her seeing him. Storm's getting worse, he said. Mara glanced at the glass doors. Rain ran down in sheets, turning headlights into bright smears. It already is. Cal's mouth twitched. It might have been a smile if it had lasted. Fair. He turned away to speak to one of his officers near the waiting room threshold. The officer guided a family group 2 steps back from the main corridor with polite hands and short sentences. The family complied, annoyed at first, then too tired to fight. Renee came around the counter with her clipboard tucked against her ribs. Any reason you are hovering at my doors? She asked Cal. Cal's eyes lifted to the ceiling for a split second, then back to her. Facilities needs to lock the stairwell to the roof. Roof access stays controlled for a while. Renee did not ask why. She asked the question that mattered. Does it affect patient flow? No, Cal said. We keep lanes clean. We keep the ambulance entrance open. Renee's gaze stayed on him. Are we expecting a helicopter? Cal's eyes shifted to the glass again. Not the kind you see on the news. Renee exhaled once slow. All right. I will keep my people on the floor. Cal nodded. Thank you. He stepped away toward the back corridor where the service elevator sat behind a keycard door. His footsteps were quiet. His posture stayed straight. Mara returned to charting, but her ears stayed open. The unit had its own language. When security started talking about the roof, people listened even if they pretended not to. A few minutes later, the overhead speaker clicked with a faint pop. Attention staff, a calm voice said. Rooftop access is restricted until further notice. Please use alternate routes as directed by security. The announcement was smooth practice, the kind that usually belonged to maintenance or a drill. The waiting room television kept playing with its volume too high. A child cried near triage and was carried to a quieter corner. Mara's gaze flicked to the ceiling camera above the entrance. The red dot blinked steady and indifferent. She looked away and updated the board, entering a timestamp with a neat tap. Lila leaned close and lowered her voice. Is that normal? Not common, Renee said before Mara answered. Renee did not look at Lila. She kept her eyes on the board, like the board could keep the department in one piece. Keep working. Lila nodded and returned to her labels. Mara checked Bay 3 again. Walt's breathing had smoothed into a better rhythm. His skin held color. His eyes were closed, but he was not slack the way the dead were slack. He was simply resting body, doing the hard, quiet work of staying. She adjusted a monitor lead that had loosened. The adhesive smelled faintly of alcohol. Walt stirred, eyelids fluttering. Still raining, he rasped without opening his eyes. Yes, Mara said. He made a sound that could have been a laugh. Figures. Mara tucked the blanket corner at his shoulder and stepped out. In the hall, a gurney rattled over a seam. Somewhere a drawer shut with a clean click. At the station, Dr. Cross's voice rose in a bright, casual tone. Lucky we caught it, he was saying to the resident, still talking about Nina shaping it into something that fit his mouth. Mara did not look at him. Her hands were on a tray of supplies, checking seals, aligning latches. She pressed one latch down. It snapped into place. Renee's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then looked down the hall toward the operating room corridor. A second later, she exhaled and her shoulders loosened. She made it out of the room, Renee said quietly, not announcing it, letting it land only where it needed to land. Bleed controlled, pressure stabilized enough for ICU. Lila's face changed immediately, relief washing through her like warmth. She swallowed hard and nodded, eyes shining. Mara set the tray down and let her hands rest on the counter for a brief second. The laminate was cool. She felt her pulse and her fingertips steady. She did not smile. She did not need to. The information was enough. Renee watched Mara's face. "You heard me," she said. "I did," Mara replied. Renee's mouth tightened into something close to approval. "Good. Back to work." The department did not pause to celebrate. It never did. A man in the waiting room argued about pain medication. A teenager held a basin too close to her face, breathing fast through panic. A tech pushed a cart of IV fluids past the station wheels, squeaking. Mara moved between bays with water cups and warm blankets. When she spoke, rooms settled by a degree. She never raised her voice. She never needed to. The night shift ran on routines, and she kept the routines clean. Then the ceiling light above the station trembled. It was subtle at first, like the building caught a small shiver. The fluorescent tube flickered, found itself, and held. A couple of heads turned. Nobody spoke. Mara looked up, not at the bulb, at the metal frame, at the way it vibrated with a rhythm that did not match thunder. The vibration stopped. The unit breathed again. A laugh rose at the desk and died quickly when another monitor chimed. Lila leaned in close, voice small. "Did you feel that?" "Probably," Wind, a tech offered, trying to make it ordinary. Renee did not answer. Her eyes moved to the corridor sign that pointed toward the roof stairwell. A piece of paper had already been taped there in plain font. "Roof access restricted." The word restricted sat on the page like a weight. Mara's gaze shifted to the glass doors. Rain ran down in long lines. Headlights smeared. The door tracks vibrated faintly when someone pushed through, then settled. Cal Stroud reappeared near the entrance with 2 additional security officers behind him. They were not running. They were not smiling. They moved like people setting furniture into the correct position. Cal stopped at the station and spoke to Renee in a voice low enough that it did not carry. "I need the main corridor clear to the service elevator," he said. "No family, staff only." Renee did not flinch. "How long?" Cal hesitated just long enough for truth to show at the edge of his control. "Short." Renee turned and lifted her voice, just enough to carry, not enough to alarm. "All staff keep the main corridor clear. Please move family back to the waiting room. Keep stretchers to the bays. Thank you." Her tone was the tone people obeyed because she never wasted it. Mara stepped toward the waiting area and guided a man with a swollen hand back toward the seats with a gentle touch to his elbow. She kept her body between him and the corridor without making it feel like a wall. "Sir," she said, calm. "We need the space for medical traffic." He opened his mouth to argue, then saw her face and closed it again. He turned and went. Mara returned to the station and set her palms flat on the counter for a beat. The vibration came again this time, through the floor, up through the soles of her shoes. A low pulse followed deeper than thunder, too steady to be wind. Across the room, the ceiling camera blinked its red dot and kept blinking. Mara lifted her eyes once to the dot, then lowered them back to the board. Her posture stayed relaxed, but her attention sharpened, mapping the department without appearing to. Renee stood beside her, eyes forward. "Keep it clean," Renee said quietly. Mara nodded once. "It is clean." Mara nodded once. "It is clean." The low pulse held a moment longer, then softened like a hand easing off a drum. People did not relax all at once. They relaxed by degrees. A tech picked up a dropped pen and pretended that was what he had been thinking about. A woman in the waiting room resumed a complaint in a quieter voice. The television volume stayed lower than it had been. Cal Stroud remained near the service corridor door posture, straight eyes lifting now and then toward the ceiling, as if listening for something inside the building's bones. One of his officers stood at the waiting room threshold, guiding family members away from the main corridor with polite hands and short sentences. Mara kept her focus on the board. Room numbers, times, names, the small math that kept strangers alive. The ambulance radio cracked, then cleared. "Alder Bay inbound trauma," the dispatcher said. "Male late 20s, shoulder injury with active bleeding, airway stable, breathing stable, pain high, arrival 3 minutes." Renee's pen stopped mid-stroke. Dr. Cross lifted his head from the chart rack, attention snapping into place. Lila straightened hands, already reaching for gloves. Cal's officer shifted his stance, ready to keep the corridor open. "Bay 2, Renee said. Mara moved without hurry. She opened Bay 2, cleared a tray, pushed a supply cart out of the doorway with her hip, and checked suction with a quick twist of the knob. The hiss came, then steadied. She tugged the oxygen line to make sure it was seated, then tapped the monitor screen awake. The beep returned, steady and patient. Lila came in carrying an IV kit and a roll of gauze. "What do you want first?" "Pressure and access," Mara said. "Then pain control. Keep it simple." Lila nodded, grateful for the order of things. Rain hammered the ambulance entrance doors. They swung inward and wet air rolled in. 2 paramedics pushed a stretcher through the threshold water, dripping from the frame. The patient held his injured arm close to his body, jaw clenched hard enough to sharpen his cheekbones. His shirt had been cut away, around the shoulder fabric, hanging in damp strips. Gauze covered the wound, but the edges were already dark. "Liam Mercer," the lead paramedic said. "Slipped moving equipment." Shoulder took the hit. Possible dislocation tear. Bleeding controlled, but keeps seeping. Vitals good. He is not happy. Liam's eyes were bright and hard, fixed on the ceiling, as if it had offended him. A muscle jumped once at the corner of his jaw. His skin looked pale under the fluorescent lights. Rain clung to his hair. Mara met the stretcher at the bay entrance, one hand on the rail to guide the turn, the other reaching for the pulse sensor. Her touch was steady, not gentle in a performative way, just precise. Liam, she said, I'm Mara. Look at me for a second. His eyes shifted to her. The anger stayed, but something else moved underneath it like a tide pulling back from a familiar shore. He stared at her face, not the badge, not the gloves. Mara, he repeated, voice rough. That's me, she said. You are safe here. She clipped the sensor onto his finger and watched the number settle. Then she placed 2 fingers at his wrist for a manual pulse anyway. Strong, fast, honest. Strong pulse, she said, more for the room than for him. Let's keep it that way. Dr. Cross stepped in, polished and brisk. Mr. Mercer, I'm Dr. Cross. Any head injury, chest pain? Liam shook his head once and winced at the movement. No, just fix this. Mara wrapped a blood pressure cuff around his other arm and hit start. The cuff inflated, squeezing. Liam's nostrils flared. Breathe, Mara said, soft but firm. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Liam glanced at her again. For a split second, his expression loosened like he had been given rules he trusted. Fine, he muttered and did it. Lila handed Mara the IV kit. Mara tied the tourniquet, found a vein, and slid the catheter in with one smooth motion. Flash! She secured it with tape, pressed flat, no wrinkles. Large bore, Mara said, and handed the hub to Lila. Draw labs. Start warm fluids. Cross watched her hands for a moment, then turned to the paramedics. Any meds given? Fentanyl 100, the lead paramedic said. Helped some. He is still a bear. Liam gave a humorless breath that might have been a laugh. I heard that. Mara peeled back the soaked gauze. The wound sat high on the shoulder, torn at the edge like the body had been pulled hard against something sharp. Blood welled slowly, not spraying, refusing to stop. This will hurt for a second, Mara said. Liam's shoulders tensed. His eyes stayed on her face. I've had worse. Mara did not react. She pressed fresh gauze down with steady pressure. She watched his skin tone the way his lips went a shade lighter when pain spiked. Hold still, she said. You can swear, just don't move. His mouth twitched. Yes, ma'am. The words came out clean, automatic, not playful, not flirtation, habit. Lila glanced up, eyebrows lifting. Renee appeared at the bay door and paused, eyes narrowing slightly at the sound, then smoothing as she read Liam's vitals on the monitor. Cross turned his head as if he had heard a language he did not know, but recognized as important. His gaze flicked from Liam to Mara, then away again. Mara checked distal pulse at the wrist on the injured side, then capillary refill at the fingertips. Pink returned fast. Good flow, she said. No nerve issues. She brushed the pads of Liam's fingers, light contact. Can you feel that? Yes, he said, voice tight. Squeeze my hand. He did solid even through pain. Good, Mara said. We keep it that way. Renee stepped into the room, voice calm. Heart rate 110. Pressure 128/76. Sat 97. Cross nodded. We will get imaging. Likely dislocation and soft tissue injury. Pain control, then reduction if needed. Liam's gaze stayed on Mara, not on Cross. You still doing this? Liam asked quietly. Mara kept pressure on the dressing. I'm a nurse. Liam's eyes tightened. A faint grin tugged at one corner of his mouth, as if the word amused him. You were never just that. Mara's jaw set for a fraction of a second. She adjusted the gauze and added a pressure dressing, wrapping it snugly. Her hands did not speed up. They did not hesitate. Focus on your breathing, she said. In, out. Liam did it again slower, the line on the monitor smoothed. Cross cleared his throat, reaching for control through small talk. What do you do for work, Mr. Mercer? Liam finally shifted his eyes to Cross. The look was polite in shape and flat in temperature. I work for the government. Cross blinked. All right. Any allergies? No. Any meds? No. Mara hung the warm fluids and adjusted the drip. She checked the IV site, then documented the start time with quick, neat taps. Her attention slid once toward the ceiling camera in the corner of the bay, then returned to Liam's hand, to the color in his fingertips. Liam watched her chart for a moment. Port Alder, he said, like he was tasting the name. Mara met his eyes. Steady. You are bleeding in Bay 2, she replied. That is the place we are in. Liam exhaled. Fair. Lila approached with a syringe, careful hands. Pain meds ordered, she said, voice softer than usual, as if she had wandered into a room where different rules applied. Mara took the syringe, checked the label, and looked at Liam. This takes the edge off. It may make you feel warm. Warm sounds great, Liam said. Mara pushed the medication slowly through the IV, watching his face, watching the monitor. His shoulders eased a fraction. The tightness around his eyes softened. Better, she asked. Liam blinked, then nodded once. Yes, ma'am. Better. The words landed again, and this time Renee heard them too. She did not comment. She simply stepped closer and checked the pressure dressing with her eyes. Liam's gaze stayed on Mara, less sharp, now heavier with recognition. You got a new name, he said. Mara's fingers paused on the keyboard not long enough to be obvious. She resumed typing. It's the one on my badge. Liam's lips parted, like he might say something else. He closed them again. He held her eyes, then looked away, first toward the ceiling. Okay, he said, and the word carried acceptance more than agreement. Mara adjusted the head of the bed to ease his breathing. She supported the injured arm in a sling, careful not to pull. She checked his fingers again, then secured the limb. Cross stepped closer and studied the dressing and the way it held. Good job, he said, and something in his voice reached for ownership. Mara nodded without looking at him. It will seep. We watch it. Renee motioned Cross out to the hall with 2 fingers. Cross followed, glancing back once. He saw the way Liam kept watching Mara. He saw the way Liam's breathing slowed when Mara spoke. He saw that Mara did not use a softer voice. She used a steadier one. In the bay, Lila leaned toward Mara, voice low. Do you know him? Mara kept her hands moving, smoothing tape, aligning edges. He is my patient. Lila hesitated. He called you ma'am like you were in charge. Mara did not look up. In this room, I am in charge of keeping him stable. Liam spoke without turning his head. She's good, he said, low and certain. Lila's cheeks flushed. I can see that. Mara checked the monitor, then Liam's face. Any dizziness? No. Nausea? No. Good, Mara said. Stay still. Liam's eyes returned to her. Different kind of rain, he murmured almost to himself. Mara's hand tightened on the bed rail for one brief second. Then she loosened it and reached for a warm blanket. Heat rolled over her fingers as she unfolded it. She spread it over Liam's legs and tucked it in around his boots' edges, aligned corners, set. The gesture looked ordinary. It was not. Liam swallowed, throat working. He stared at the blanket for a moment, then back at her. You still do that, he said. Mara's voice stayed even. You were cold. Liam exhaled slowly. The medication settled. His eyelids lowered and lifted. Thank you, he said. Mara did not answer with softness. She answered with routine. Imaging is on the way. We will keep your circulation good. She stepped out of the bay and pulled off her gloves. At the sink, she washed her hands until the scent of soap replaced the scent of blood. She dried them carefully. Her sleeve stayed down. Across the station, Cal Stroud remained near the service corridor, shoulders squared, eyes occasionally lifting toward the ceiling. The main hallway stayed clear the way he wanted. The cameras blinked their red dots in the corners, patient and unblinking. Dr. Cross stood near the chart rack and looked back toward Bay 2 once more. His face was composed, but his eyes held a small, unsettled focus, as if the room had shifted its center and he had felt it move under his feet. Dr. Cross stood near the chart rack and looked back toward the Bay 2 once more. His face was composed, but his eyes held a small, unsettled focus, as if the room had shifted its center and he had felt it move under his feet. He turned to the computer screen, typed a sentence, deleted it, then typed it again with different words. He told himself it was fatigue. He told himself it was the hour pressing down the stale air, the way the storm made everything feel narrower. That was not the real reason. He had seen the way Liam Mercer looked at Mara Hayes, not like a patient looking at a nurse, like someone recognizing a person behind a name tag. He had heard the yes ma'am come out clean, automatic the way certain words lived in muscle memory. He had watched Mara ignore it and keep pressure on a wound like the only truth in the room was blood and time. Cross knew Alder Bay. He knew its politics, its gossip, its quiet competitions. He had never seen someone pull the air around them the way Mara did. She did not ask for attention. She did not collect it. It still gathered. He found Renee at the board and tried to sound casual. Where did Mara transfer from? He asked. Renee did not look up. Her pen moved a name into a different column. She did not transfer. Cross waited, then smiled like the silence was a joke he understood. Okay, where did she work before here? Renee's gaze lifted to him flat and steady. She works here. Cross gave a short laugh that landed wrong. You know what I mean. Renee tapped her pen once against the clipboard. The click was small. The effect was not. I mean what I said. Cross held her eyes a moment longer, searching for a crack. He found none. Renee looked past him toward Bay 2, as if his curiosity were a noise to be managed, nothing more. Cross backed off with a shrug that pretended he did not care. All right, just asking. Renee went back to the board, then asked the board. Cross walked away, telling himself he needed to check something in his locker. His steps sounded too loud on the polished floor. The staff corridor behind the unit was dimmer than the main hall, lit by older bulbs that hummed. The smell changed back there. Less antiseptic. More damp fabric, stale microwaved meals, and the faint sweetness of cheap air freshener, trying too hard. A mop bucket sat against the wall waterline, stained brown. Somewhere a dryer thumped with a slow, tired rhythm. He stopped at the locker room door and listened. No voices, only the distant beeping of monitors muffled like sound underwater. He pushed the door open. Metal lockers lined the walls in rows. A bench ran down the center, scratched with keys and names carved by bored hands. A ceiling vent pushed lukewarm air that smelled like wet cotton. Cross's own locker was near the corner. Mara's was 2 rows over halfway down. Plain metal. No sticker, no name tag. Just a small round keyhole. He stood there long enough to feel his pulse in his throat. His mouth was dry. He told himself he had reasons. Patient safety. Staff safety. If Liam Mercer was government and he recognized Mara, then maybe there was a history that mattered. Maybe there was a threat. Maybe there was a liability. The words sounded responsible inside his head. The truth was simpler. He wanted to know. His hand went into his pocket and closed around a spare key. He had it because physicians complained when they locked themselves out. Administration liked to keep things moving. Keys were practical. Keys were also temptations. He walked to Mara's locker and stared at the lock. He hesitated, then slid the key in and turned it. The click was quiet, but it sounded loud anyway. He pulled the door open. The inside was neat. Not obsessively neat. Intentional. 2 sets of scrubs folded tight. A gray sweatshirt rolled into a smooth cylinder. Clean shoes in a plastic bag. A small toiletry kit. A pack of gum. A protein bar. A black pen clipped to the inside pocket. Cross let out a breath he did not know he was holding, and for a second he felt foolish. He had expected something dramatic. Something that would justify his itch. Then he saw a small cloth pouch tucked behind the folded scrubs, hidden, but not buried. The fabric looked worn soft at the corners, like it had been carried a long time. Cross pulled it out with careful fingers. It felt heavier than it should. He loosened the drawstring. Inside lay a patch, faded edges frayed. The lettering was still readable. Kestrel, restricted. Cross stared at it until the words stopped being letters and started being weight. Restricted meant paperwork. Restricted meant doors that did not open for ordinary people. Restricted meant a part of the world that did not show up in hospital policy manuals. He turned the patch over, plain backing. No clue. His fingers went back into the pouch. A thin length of paracord coiled tight. A small carabiner. A tiny roll of medical tape with dust on the edge. Ordinary objects, yet the way they were kept made them feel like tools, not leftovers. His phone was in his hand before he admitted it to himself. He held it low screen, dimmed as if the room could see intention. He snapped a photo. No shutter sound. Still, he felt it like the device had spoken. The locker room seemed to get quieter. He tightened the drawstring and slid the pouch onto the bench beside him. His thumb moved across the screen. Search bar. He typed Kestrel restricted patch. Then Kestrel medical program. Then Kestrel unit medic. Results came back then. A few dead forums. A birding site about hawks. A short mention in a cached page that ended mid-sentence. He tapped a link. White screen. A warning line appeared at the top, small and cold. Access blocked. Then a second line slid in beneath it, colder. Unauthorized access may be monitored. Cross's stomach dropped. The air in the locker room felt suddenly heavier. He stared at the words until they blurred, then lifted his eyes toward the ceiling vent as if it had eyes. He turned his head and looked toward the corner near the door. There was a camera outside in the corridor. He knew that. He did not remember if there was one inside. He realized he had never checked. He had never needed to. His fingers tightened around the phone. The plastic creaked faintly. He locked the screen, but his reflection stayed on the black glass, pale and blurred. He shoved the phone into his pocket as if he could hide the weight of what he had done. A sound came from the hallway outside the locker room. Wheels a cart, the squeak of rubber turning at the corner. Cross swallowed. He looked at the open locker. The folded scrubs. The empty space where the pouch belonged. He felt clumsy, like a child caught touching something that did not belong to him. He moved fast, but not sloppy. He placed the patch back into the pouch, tightened the drawstring, and slid it behind the scrubs exactly where it had been. He adjusted the scrubs by a fraction so the pouch edge disappeared. He nudged the sweatshirt roll back into its place. He glanced at the shoes in the bag, then stopped himself. That was too much. That was not his. He closed the locker door gently. He turned the key slowly. The click sounded like relief. His palm stayed on the metal a moment flat, as if he could erase heat and fingerprints and guilt. The cartwheels squeaked again closer. Cross walked to the sink and turned on the water. Cold at first, then warming. He washed his hands too long, scrubbing at nothing. Soap smell rose sharp. He rinsed, then rinsed again, and shut the faucet off with his wrist. He dried his hands on a paper towel, then folded the towel once more crisp and neat. He did not know why he folded it. His hands did it on their own, as if order could fix a mistake. The door opened, and a janitor pushed a cleaning cart inside, eyes down, earbuds in. The man nodded at Cross without interest and rolled past him. The mop head dragged a wet line behind it. Cross forced a smile that was not returned. He left the locker room and walked back toward the unit with measured steps, quieter now. The closer he got, the louder the department became again. Monitor beeps. Voices. The soft thump of a supply bin closing. He passed the stairwell door that led to the roof. A sign had been taped up in plain font. Roof access restricted. He stared at the word restricted and felt his stomach tighten again. The phone in his pocket seemed to weigh more than it should. The photo he had taken felt like a live wire pressed against his thigh. At the nurse's station, Mara stood with Lila explaining something with her hands, simple and practical. Lila nodded grateful. Mara's voice stayed low, her tone steady. She placed a label on a chart and pressed it down flat with 2 fingers, perfect alignment. Cross slowed without meaning to. He watched the gesture and felt something shift inside him, a prick of shame that rose hot under his collar. Mara's eyes flicked to him. Not suspicious, aware like she was taking his measure without making him feel examined. Cross opened his mouth, then closed it. His tongue felt thick. He tried again, forcing his voice into something normal. "How is Mercer?" Stable, Mara said. She did not look away from the screen. Pain-controlled, bleeding-controlled for now. For now, Cross repeated automatic. Mara met his eyes for a beat. "We watch the dressing. We watch circulation. We do not guess." Cross nodded too quickly. He wanted to say something about the patch, about the warning, about what he had seen in her locker. The words stayed trapped behind his teeth. Renee stood at the board, listening without looking like she listened. Her posture was steady. Her silence held the room the way a hand held a door. Cross stepped back. "Okay, good." Mara turned back to the chart without ceremony. Cross walked to his workstation and pulled up another patient note. The cursor blinked on the screen, patient and indifferent. He typed a sentence, then stopped. His thoughts were not steady, even if his hands were. Across the station, the ceiling camera blinked its red dot. Mara glanced up at it for a fraction of a second, then down again. The movement was so quick, it could have been nothing. Cross could not make himself look away. Cross could not make himself look away. The ceiling camera blinked its red dot steady as a heartbeat. Mara's glance up at it was so quick, it could have been nothing, yet it landed in his mind like a fingerprint left on glass. His phone sat heavy in his pocket. The image he had taken felt hot against his thigh, like it might burn through fabric. The lights trembled again. This time it was not a flicker. It was a fine vibration that ran through the ceiling panels and into the fixtures, making the fluorescent hum sharpen. A cup of pens at the counter rattled softly. Someone put a hand on it without thinking, palm down, as if that could steady the building. The sound followed a low pulse that pressed through the floor and up into bones. Not thunder, too even, too deliberate. Renee lifted her chin and listened. Lila's eyes widened, then darted to Mara as if Mara might translate. Mara set a stack of labels down and placed her palm flat on the counter. She felt the vibration through the laminate. Cross stood up from his workstation, half irritated, half uneasy. "If we lose power," he said, trying for humor, "I am not doing reductions by flashlight." No one laughed. The pulse grew more present. Not louder, closer. At the entrance, Cal Stroud's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then answered with one word. Stroud. His voice stayed calm through a short exchange that only he could hear. His eyes went up to the ceiling again, as if the building itself were speaking. When he ended the call, he did not exhale like a relieved man. He moved like a man setting a plan into place. He walked toward the nurse's station. Renee met him halfway, clipboard tucked against her ribs. "Talk," she said. Cal leaned in low enough that the words would not carry. "Keep the service corridor clear. Keep the stairwell locked. Nobody goes toward the roof. Not staff, not family." Renee's eyes narrowed by a fraction, while Cal's gaze flicked to the glass doors, where rain ran in long lines, turning headlights into bright smears. 3 aircraft, he said. On approach. Cross heard the word aircraft and took a step closer without meaning to. Curiosity pulled him like a hook. Aircraft, he repeated. Renee did not turn her head. She raised a hand, palm out, a quiet stop. The gesture had no drama. It had authority. Cross stopped anyway, heat rising in his cheeks. He could feel Mara behind him at the counter, not looking at him, not reacting yet, present in the way she always was. Cal spoke again, still low. "They are Navy." Lila swallowed. "Navy here." Renee's mouth tightened. "My unit keeps moving," she said to Cal. Nothing blocks intake, nothing blocks patient care. Cal nodded once. Agreed. They came in through service access. They will leave the same way. The low pulse swelled, then deepened into layered sound. Rotors, not a single helicopter but several. The rhythm pressed against the building like a hand against a door. Rain turned into sharp mist against the glass. A tech near the medication room whispered, "That is not a news chopper." A paramedic by the ambulance entrance stared up at the ceiling as if he could see through it. "Three birds," he murmured, voice flat with recognition. The overhead speaker clicked on with a soft pop. "Attention staff," the same calm voice said. "Please remain in your assigned areas. Rooftop access remains restricted. Thank you for your cooperation." It was the kind of message designed to sound normal. It did not. The waiting room noise dimmed. People sensed something without being told. Even the televisions mounted on the wall seemed too loud, and someone turned one down. A faint smell seeped into the ventilation, sharp and metallic like jet fuel and wet steel. It did not belong in a hospital. It belonged on a flight line. Mara's eyes flicked toward the service corridor door. Her face remained neutral, her shoulders aligned. Her hands returned to the keyboard, entering a time, then another, as if the board could anchor the room. Cross felt the ground shift under his certainty. The word restricted flashed in his mind, connected to the sign on the stairwell, connected to the patch in his phone, connected to the warning he could not unsee. Cal returned to the back corridor, then came back with 2 security officers. They were not running. They moved like men setting furniture into position. He stopped at the station. "Renee, I need the main corridor clear. No family, no patients. Staff only." Renee turned and raised her voice, just enough to carry, not enough to alarm. "All staff keep the main corridor clear. Move families to the waiting room. Keep stretchers to the bays. Thank you." Her tone was the tone people obeyed, because she never wasted it. Mara stepped toward the waiting area and guided a couple with a toddler back behind the glass line, with a gentle touch at the elbow and a calm sentence. "We need space for medical traffic," she said. "This is still an emergency department." The father opened his mouth to argue. He saw Mara's face and closed it again. He moved back. Cross watched her do it. She did not block the corridor like a wall. She redirected it like water. The rotor sound shifted. The pressure lifted slightly as if the aircraft had found the roof and settled. The vibration changed from approach to presence. Cal's radio crackled once. He ignored it. His phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen, answered, listened, then looked across the station at Mara. "Mara," he said. She did not flinch at her name in his mouth. She looked at him the way she looked at a monitor waiting for information. "If anyone asks questions you do not want to answer," Cal said, "send them to me." Mara nodded once. "Okay." Cross's throat tightened. He wanted to ask why. He wanted to insert himself into whatever was happening above their ceiling tiles. He wanted to be necessary. Renee's hand lifted again, palm out without looking. Cross stayed where he was. The service corridor door opened. 2 men stepped out first. Dark jackets, no visible insignia, hair clipped short, eyes that scanned fast, then settled. Behind them came a 3rd man, with rain on his shoulders and a calm that did not need volume. He carried himself like someone who knew exactly where his feet were. He stopped at the threshold of the nurse's station and waited for Cal to approach as if he understood that hospitals had their own chain of command. Cal stepped forward. "Cal Stroud, Security Chief, you are in a medical facility." The man nodded. "Commander Jonah Pike, United States Navy." His voice was steady. It did not reach for authority. It simply stated a fact. Cal held out a hand. "Credentials." Pike produced a wallet, opened it, and held it at an angle that allowed Cal to read without stepping into Pike's space. Cal checked it, eyes narrowing slightly, then relaxing. He handed it back. "Thank you," Cal said. Pike's gaze moved past Cal and found Renee. Renee stepped forward, shoulders squared. "Renee Alvarez, charge nurse." Pike gave a small nod. "We will not disrupt your operations. We will follow your access rules." Renee did not soften, then follow them. Pike turned his attention to Mara. For a moment, the department's noise seemed to pull back. The monitors kept beeping. A phone rang and was answered quickly. Still, the air around the station held tight. Pike spoke as if he were speaking to one person in a crowded room. "Mara Hayes." Mara's posture did not change. "Yes, I am here to speak with you," Pike said. "Privately, if possible." Cross took a step forward without thinking. "This is a hospital," he said. Voice sharper than he intended. "You cannot just show up and take staff." Renee's hand lifted again, firmer now. "Doctor." Cross stopped, but the momentum of his nerves stayed in his chest. Pike looked at Cross. The look was polite and flat. Not angry, not dismissive. Calibrated. Dr. Pike said, a question shaped like a statement. Cross swallowed. "Dr. Cross." Pike nodded once, then returned his gaze to Mara. "We are not here to take her," he said. "We are here to request her." Renee's jaw tightened. Request for what? Pike's answer was brief. Medical support. Time sensitive. Renee did not move aside. We have patients. We have staffing. You do not remove my nurse without a plan. Pike did not argue. Understood. We can brief within your rules here. With security present? Access. No disruption to patient flow. Mara looked at Renee, then at the board, then toward Bay 2's glass where Liam lay under a blanket, eyes closed, but not asleep. She returned her gaze to Pike. Say what you need to say, Mara said. Pike placed a rugged tablet case on the counter with care, like setting down a loaded instrument. The case was wet from rain. The screen was dark. We need your medical authority, Pike said. The words landed quietly. They changed the air anyway. Cross felt his stomach drop, his phone pressed against his leg like a confession. He wondered if Mara had noticed his theft of privacy, his photo, his fear. Her face gave him nothing. Not forgiveness, not accusation, only attention. Renee's voice stayed even. Why her? Pike did not glance away. Because she has done it before. Lila's hands froze around a roll of tape. A tech at the far counter stopped mid-sentence. Cross's chest tightened. The patch in his pocket might as well have been shouting now. Mara rested her fingertips on the edge of the tablet case. She did not open it. She did not flinch. Cal stays, she said. Pike nodded. Of course. Renee remained at Mara's shoulder, grounded and sharp. If this affects my unit, she said, I will know. You will, Pike replied. Mara lifted her eyes to the ceiling camera for a fraction of a second, then back to the case. Her voice stayed level. Turn it on. Pike flipped open the case. The tablet woke with a dim glow, then sharpened into a live feed. For a second, it was only darkness and sound. Harsh breathing. A low voice counting. A faint metallic clink like tools being set down too carefully. Then the image stabilized. A cramped room, dirty walls, lit by a single headlamp beam that swept across faces and hands. Blood on sleeves. Gauze packed into a wound. Someone in the background groaned and tried to swallow it back. The camera angle shifted and caught a man leaning close to the lens dart, streaked across his cheek, a cut at the corner of his mouth. His eyes were focused in the way eyes got when they had been awake too long. Command, he said. We have multiple casualties. No evac. We need medical. His voice broke on the last word. Not from fear, from effort. Pike kept his own voice low. This link is secure. You will hear a nurse speaking. You will follow her directions. Understood. The man on the screen nodded once hard. Understood. Mara watched without blinking. She tracked details like a chart in motion, skin color, rate of breathing, the shine of sweat, a hand that trembled when it tried to apply pressure. The emergency department behind her continued its gentle beeping, but her attention narrowed to the grainy image and the sound of breath coming through the speakers. Mara leaned closer to the tablet and spoke, voice calm, precise. How many are conscious? Mara leaned closer to the tablet and spoke, voice calm, precise. How many are conscious? The man on the screen blinked hard as if the question pulled him into a list he did not want to count. 2 talking, he said. 1 drifting. 3 down. One of the down is breathing, but not responding. Mara nodded once. Her eyes moved across the frame, taking inventory the way she did with a crash cart. Light, hands, blood. The way the headlamp beam shook when the man holding it breathed. Who has hands, Mara asked. Who can do what I say? The man swallowed. Me. Name's Grant. Another guy can hold pressure. The rest are hurt. Grant, Mara said. And the way she said his name made it a handle he could grab. Put the camera on the quietest patient, the one who was not moving much. The feed jostled. The headlamp beam swung, caught a boot, a wall, a smear of dark on the floor, then settled on a body lying on their side. Pale lips, eyes shut, chest rising fast and shallow like they were sipping air. Is that patient conscious? Mara asked. No, Grant said, not responding. Check pulse at the neck, Mara said. Tell me if it is strong or weak. Tell me if it is fast or slow. A hand entered the frame, fingers pressing the side of the throat. Grant's breath hitched. Weak, he said. Fast. Okay, Mara replied. Keep that airway open. Chin up, head turned to the side. If they vomit, roll them. Do not let them lie flat. Grant nodded hard. His hands obeyed. Behind Mara, the emergency department kept its soft noise, but the station had gone still. Renee stood close enough to see the screen without crowding. Cal held position at the boundary eyes, flicking once toward the corridor, once back to Pike. Cross hovered a step behind the group, too close to pretend he did not care, and too far to belong. Mara's voice stayed even. Show me the bleeding. Grant moved the camera. The headlamp beam passed over a thigh wrapped in soaked fabric. A hand clamped to a lower abdomen. A forearm with blood running down to the wrist and dripping to the floor. I need the one you cannot keep up with, Mara said. The one that keeps soaking through. The camera swung to the thigh again. This one, Grant said. It keeps coming. Do you have a tourniquet? Mara asked. Grant reached off screen and came back with one. Yes, place it high on the leg, Mara said. As high as you can. Tighten until bleeding stops. Not until it feels tight, until bleeding stops. You count your turns out loud. Grant's hands shook, then steadied as he followed the structure. The strap went around. He twisted the windlass. The patient's leg jerked. Keep going, Mara said. 1, Grant said. 2, 3. The blood slowed, then stopped. Lock it, Mara said. Now write the time on something and put it where you can see it. Grant tore a strip of tape scribbled with a marker that left thick lines and stuck it to the strap. Read it back. Read it back, Mara said. 257, Grant answered. Good, Mara replied. Say it again. 257. Second voice in the background echoed it, breathless, obedient. Mara watched the tourniquet and the hands for another beat. Her eyes flicked to skin color, to how the headlamp beam moved. The shaking had lessened. The room on screen still looked like a place that wanted to swallow people, but the motion had started to organize. Now pack what you can, Mara said. If there is a wound you can see, put pressure and pack to the source. Keep pressure. Do not peek. Grant nodded. We are low on gauze. Use clean cloth, Mara replied. Pressure matters. Save sterile for deep wounds. Do not lift to check. If you lift, you restart bleeding. Pike stood very still beside the counter, anonymity Mara. His eyes stayed on the screen. He did not speak into Mara's channel. When he did speak, it was a low murmur to Cal kept away from the tablet microphone. Renee's jaw was tight. Commander, she said to Pike without raising her voice. You are in a civilian hospital. You do not move my people through patient care space because your night got complicated. Pike met her eyes. Calm, respectful. We will not cross your patient areas, he said. We came in through service access. We leave the same way. We will not block intake. We will not touch your staff unless they agree. Renee did not soften, but she listened. Mara kept talking to the screen. Grant, tell me what you have for warmth. Grant looked off camera, then back. Jackets, emergency foil, not much. Use it, Mara said. Wrap them, keep them dry, insulate them from the floor. Hypothermia kills even after bleeding stops. Grant's throat worked. Copy! Cross swallowed behind them. The warning message he had seen in the locker room flashed in his mind like a bright sign. Unauthorized access may be monitored. He could feel his phone against his leg. He did not touch it. Pike reached down and lifted a compact bag, dark and scuffed, and placed it on the counter near the tablet. The zipper tabs were thick, built for gloved hands. Renee's eyes snapped to it. No, she said, immediate. Mara glanced at Renee, then at the bag, then back to Pike. Why is that here? She asked, voice unchanged. Stable comms platform, Pike said, and medical gear. We need you close enough to keep the line clean. Mara's fingers rested on the counter edge. You want me off the floor, she said. Pike did not deny it. Yes, we are requesting, not forcing. Renee's hand tightened on her clipboard. We are short-staffed, she said. Mara turned her head toward Renee. Her voice softened by a fraction not less firm. You have Lila, she said. You have the team. You can hold the unit. Renee searched Mara's face, looking for the crack where exhaustion lived. You are tired, she said. You have been on your feet all night. Mara nodded once, acknowledging the truth without making room for it. So are they, she said, and tipped her chin toward the screen. Cross found his voice rough. Mara, you do not have to do this. Mara looked at him for the first time since Pike arrived. Her gaze was steady. It held no warmth. It held no anger. It simply saw him, and that was worse than either. Pike spoke in the same measured tone he used for Renee. Doctor, with respect, this is her decision. Renee's eyes cut to Cross. With respect, she echoed, quiet and sharp, stay in your lane. Cross shut his mouth. The shame rose hot under his collar. Mara faced Pike again. My terms, she said. Pike nodded. Say them! Mara spoke, like she was placing orders in a chart. I hold sole medical authority for this link. You hold tactical decisions. I do not give orders about movement. You do not give orders about medicine. Agreed, Pike said immediately. No deviation from my protocol when it affects survival. Mara continued. No shortcuts because someone wants speed. If I say stop bleeding, you stop bleeding. If I say move the camera, you move the camera. Copy, Pike said. Mara looked at Cal. Corridor stays clear. Cal nodded once. Already done. Mara looked back to Renee. Patient flow stays protected. Renee's jaw tightened, then she nodded. Yes. Mara returned her attention to the tablet. Grant. She said, I am your medical lead. You do what I say, and you tell me the truth, even when it is ugly. Do you understand? Grant nodded hard. Yes, ma'am. The words landed in the station like a click. Lila froze with a roll of tape in her hands. A tech at the far counter stopped mid-sentence. Even the phones felt quieter for a breath. Mara did not react to the shift. She only used it. Confirm the tourniquet time again, she said. 2:57, Grant replied. Good, Mara said. Now show me the abdominal wound. Not close. I need context. The feed widened. A hand pressed down hard on a lower abdomen wrap. Blood oozed at the edge, dark and slow. Keep pressure, Mara said. Do not lift. If you have cloth pack around the edges and keep your hand there, rotate hands so nobody loses strength. Grant's voice steadied as structure took hold. Copy. Mara glanced once toward Bay 2's glass. Liam lay under a blanket, eyes closed chest, rising easier now that pain had dulled. She looked toward Bay 3. Walt's monitor sang a slow, present rhythm. She turned to Renee. Keep eyes on Mercer, she said. Do not let him pull at his dressing when he thinks nobody is watching. Renee let out a short breath that might have been a laugh. I can handle a stubborn government man. Mara nodded. She placed her hand on the compact bag's handle. The rough webbing sat familiar under her palm. She picked up the tablet with her other hand. Service corridor, she said to Cal. Cal stepped forward. Clear. Mara moved into the cleared hallway. Pike and 2 men followed without crowding her. Their eyes swept corners with practiced efficiency. They did not touch anyone. They did not speak to staff. The emergency department continued behind them, monitors beeping a call bell, ringing once then answered. The service corridor smelled like concrete, rain-soaked insulation and hot metal. Under it all was the sharp bite of aviation fuel wrong in a hospital. Mara held the tablet close, angling the microphone away from echoes. Grant's face filled the screen, lit by headlamp. Dirt streaked his cheek. His eyes were red from strain. Update, Mara said. 2 talking, Grant answered, 1 drifting, 3 down. Tourniquet holding. Quiet 1 still breathing. Keep someone on the quiet one at all times, Mara said. If breathing changes, you tell me first. Yes, ma'am. Cal swiped a keycard at the service elevator. The lock clicked. Doors opened to an empty car that hummed softly. Mara stepped in. Pike followed. The doors closed, sealing them in fluorescent buzz and faint vibration that traveled up the rail into Mara's palm. As the elevator rose, the rotor presence became physical. A steady pulse through steel. Grant, Mara said, check skin temperature. Who is coldest? Quiet 1, Grant said. Clammy. Wrap them, Mara replied. Insulate from the floor, head turned. Keep talking to them every minute. The elevator doors opened to a roof landing. Cold air rushed in. Cal pushed the roof door wide. Sound hit them all at once. A heavy thrum that pressed rain into sharp mist. 3 helicopters sat on the pad, dark bodies slick with water. Rotors carved the night. Running lights blinked through wet air. A crew member signaled them forward with gloved hands. Mara bent into the wind knees, flexed tablet hugged to her chest. The bag strap cut across her shoulder. Rotor wash shoved at her coat and tried to steal her balance. She took 1 step, then another by feel. They reached the nearest aircraft. A crew member pulled the door open. Warm air spilled out, smelling of electronics and fuel. Mara climbed in and planted her boots on the ridged floor. Pike climbed in behind her and shut the door. He handed her a headset. Mara fitted it over her ears. The roar dulled. The world narrowed to breath and words. Grant's voice came through clear. Relief lived in it. I can hear you. Good, Mara replied. Keep the camera steady. Show me hands and faces. The feed settled again on the cramped room. Blood on the floor. Someone slumped against a wall. Another crouched with both hands buried in cloth. The quiet patient lay on their side chest, rising fast and shallow. Mara's questions came short and sharp. Any gurgling, any vomiting, any chest wounds. No chest, Grant said. No gurgle. 1 guy keeps fading. Put the camera on him, Mara said. The beam swung to a man against the wall, eyes half open, lips pale. A hand held pressure at a hip wound, edges darkening. Ask his name, Mara said. Ask what day it is. Grant leaned in. Name. Eli, the man whispered. What day, Grant asked. Eli blinked slowly. Friday. His chin dipped. Grant's voice tightened. He is going out. Mara kept her tone level. Hold his jaw forward. Keep him upright. Keep pressure on the wound. Talk to him like he can still hear you. Grant obeyed. Eli, stay with me. Look at the light. The helicopter cabin vibrated under Mara's feet, a contained thunder. Rain ticked against the fuselage. A crew member watched instruments without looking at Mara, giving her space the way professionals did when the work was delicate. Pike spoke briefly into his own mic, words kept away from Mara's channel. He looked back at her. We can hold here as long as needed. Mara did not look up. Then we keep them alive, she said, and returned to the screen. Grant. She said, rotate hands on pressure every 2 minutes. You tell me when you switch. Copy, Grant replied. Mara watched the headlamp beam. It no longer whipped across the room. It moved with intention, now lingering on hands, on faces, on the tourniquet strap that stayed locked. When someone shivered, a jacket was pulled tighter. When a hand started to slip, another replaced it before pressure was lost. Color is improving, Grant said, after a long minute. Pulse is still fast, but it is not fading. Keep them insulated. Mara replied. Do not let anyone lie flat. Do not loosen the tourniquet. Confirm time again. 2:57, Grant said. Say it again, Mara replied. 2:57. A second voice echoed it. Mara nodded once unseen. She checked the time on the tablet and spoke it aloud for Grant to anchor. He repeated it back, mouth-shaping certainty out of chaos. When the aircraft settled and the vibration shifted, Mara felt it through the seat frame. The door opened. Cold air rushed in again. Cal guided them back through the roof landing and into the service corridor. Mara kept the tablet hugged close, voice steady in her headset. Grant's breathing came through her ear like someone standing beside her. They descended in the service elevator and stepped back into the emergency department, noise phones and monitors and wet boots, antiseptic and warmed plastic. At the nurse's station, Renee was waiting, eyes locked on Mara's face. Mara removed the headset and set the tablet down on the counter with care. Her voice stayed even. They are stable for now, she said. Renee exhaled once slow. That is enough. Mara's hands were clean. The smell of soap clung to her skin. She looked at the board, then at Bay 2, then at Bay 3, and stepped back into the familiar rhythm of the unit without pausing to make the moment bigger than it was. Mara's hands were clean. The smell of soap clung to her skin. She looked at the board, then at Bay 2, then at Bay 3, and stepped back into the familiar rhythm of the unit without pausing to make the moment bigger than it was. Cal Stroud stood at the edge of the station with Commander Pike, both men careful not to spill into patient space. Pike's jacket still held rein at the shoulders. Water beaded on the tablet case like it did not know where it belonged. Thank you, Pike said, quiet enough that it felt like a private line in a public room. Mara gave a small nod. Keep our corridors clear. Pike did not argue. He accepted the boundary the way he had accepted every rule Renee placed in front of him. He turned and moved back toward the service corridor with the two men who had arrived ahead of him. Cal walked with them, just far enough to keep the path clean, then stopped at the threshold and watched them disappear behind the keycard door. The smell of aviation fuel thinned in the vents, replaced by the familiar bite of antiseptic and warmed plastic. The fluorescent lights held steady. The cup of pens at the counter stopped rattling and sat still as if it had never moved. Renee stayed at Mara's side for a moment. She did not reach for Mara's shoulder. She did not say, "You did good." Renee was not built for theatrical comfort. She scanned the board and spoke in the language that kept people alive. Bay 2, she said. How is he? Mara's eyes went to the glass. Liam Mercer lay under a warm blanket, head turned slightly to the side, breathing easier, his dressing held. His hand rested on top of the blanket, like he was anchoring himself. He is stable, Mara said. Renee nodded. Keep eyes on him. I will, Mara replied, and moved toward Bay 3. Walt Briggs stirred when Mara entered, blinking at the ceiling, as if trying to place the room in his memory. His lips were less gray now. His skin held a tired color. Still raining, he rasped. Yes, Mara said. He made a small sound that could have been a laugh, then coughed and winced as his chest remembered the compressions. Mara adjusted the cannula and watched his oxygen number settle. Warm, he said, surprised, like it was a word he had forgotten. Mara tucked the blanket at his shoulder, smoothing it once until it lay still. Stay that way, she replied. Walt's eyes flicked to her badge. Mara. That's my name, she said. He swallowed. Thank you. Mara did not turn it into an exchange. She checked his pulse, checked his skin temperature, and stepped back out. In Bay 2, Liam's eyes were open when she passed the glass. He did not wave. He did not call out. He lifted his chin a fraction and gave a single small nod. It was a gesture that carried weight without needing sound. Mara gave him the briefest nod in return and kept moving. Across the station, Dr. Cross sat at his workstation with his shoulders tight. The cursor blinked on his screen, patient and indifferent. His phone stayed heavy in his pocket. The photo felt like an object with teeth. He watched Mara move and felt the shape of his own mistake pressing against him. He could not decide which was worse, the patch in her locker or the ease with which the Navy had spoken her name as if it belonged in their mouths. Dawn came gray and wet light seeping through clouds without warmth. The storm did not break. It simply changed tempo, rain thinning from sheets into steady needles that rode on glass. As morning shift filtered in the switchboard lit up, calls came fast and clipped, reporters, local stations, people who asked for statements, names, confirmation. Administration answered with one rule that traveled quickly through email and whispered reminders. One spokesperson, no staff interviews. Cal coordinated with local police at the entrance and kept the ambulance lane open. He set a perimeter with polite bodies and short sentences. Inside, Renee kept the unit moving and kept voices low. Staff walked a little straighter, not from pride, from awareness. The cameras in the corners blinked their red dots and kept blinking. That afternoon, the department gathered in a conference room that smelled like burnt coffee and damp wool. Chairs scraped on tile, people held paper cups and did not drink. A screen at the front of the room played silent footage from the service corridor. 3 men in dark jackets, calm posture, no insignia, no raised voices. On the video, Mara walked with the tablet hugged to her chest, steps measured, head angled slightly as if listening. Behind her, the men answered in unison, voices too low for the speakers to catch clearly, but the shape of the response was visible in their mouths. "Yes, ma'am." Lila sat forward, hands clasped, eyes wide. Renee watched without flinching face, neutral jaw set. Cal stood near the door, arms folded, scanning the room, as if the conference room was another bay that could turn dangerous if someone let it. Cross sat in the back row, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the screen. He did not look at anyone. He kept his hands still in his lap because he did not trust them. When the meeting ended, work returned to its rhythm, but the tone stayed altered. In spare minutes, staff practiced pressure wraps. They practiced tightening a tourniquet until bleeding stopped. Not until it felt tight. They practiced keeping warmth where it belonged. A cart that used to sit half-stocked stayed full. The main corridor stayed clear. People moved out of each other's way without being asked. 3 days later, Mara walked in through the staff entrance in clean scrubs, hair damp at the ends from the rain. Conversations softened as she passed. Not silence, more like a room adjusting its volume. She checked the board and greeted Renee with a nod. Renee returned it steady as always. Mara's hands found her station and set her pen parallel to the edge of the clipboard without thinking. Cross waited near the medication room, shoulders drawn in close. He looked like he had been standing there for too long. "Mara," he said. She stopped. Her face gave him nothing. Her eyes rested on him the way they rested on a monitor when a rhythm started to change. Cross swallowed. "I was wrong," he said. The words came out plain, stripped of polish. "I judged you. I took credit for what you saw with Nina. I went into your locker." The hallway sounds continued around them. A call light chimed and was answered. A gurney rolled past. Someone asked for ice chips. Mara held his gaze for a long second. She did not ask why. She did not demand details. The confession was enough to map the shape of his character in her mind. "Protect the vulnerable first," she said. Cross's throat worked. Yes, he managed. Mara stepped aside and continued toward the station as if she had been asked about a medication dose, as if she had simply given the correct answer. Cross moved out of her path without needing to be told. Late that afternoon, a single sedan eased to the curb in the drizzle. Commander Pike walked into reception alone and left a sealed manila envelope with Mara's name written in careful block letters. He did not cross into the emergency department. Cal received it and brought it to Renee. Renee carried it down the hall and handed it to Mara near the window by the staff corridor, away from patients, away from cameras, as much as anything in a hospital could ever be away. Mara turned the envelope over once. It was sealed clean. No return address. Inside were 6 small notes, each folded tight edges, aligned as if someone had copied the way she folded blankets. The handwriting varied. One was shaky ink blotted where a hand had trembled. One was precise, small letters packed close like they did not want to waste space. One had a smudge across the bottom where someone had dragged a thumb through wet ink. Mara read the first, and her face did not change. She read the second, and her shoulders stayed aligned. She read the third, and her throat tightened once a small internal shift. On the fourth, her vision blurred. A single tear slid down her cheek, warm against cool skin. She did not wipe it fast. She did not hide it with a joke. She let it fall, then blinked and kept breathing. Renee stood beside her and did not speak. She watched Mara fold each note back into its square and place it in the envelope in the same order. When Mara sealed the flap, she pressed it down with 2 fingers, smooth, exact. A call light blinked in basics, bright and impatient. Mara tucked the envelope into her scrub pocket like something fragile and turned toward the sound. She pulled a warm blanket from the warmer. Heat rolled over her fingers. She folded it tight, edges aligned, and carried it down the hall to a patient shivering under thin sheets. She laid it over their shoulders and smoothed it once until the fabric lay still. The monitor nearby beeped in a calm rhythm. Outside rain tapped the windows in steady lines. Inside, Mara moved back toward the station hands already reaching for the next pair of gloves. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.